r/AskReddit by Planet Reddit. Florists of Reddit. What's the saddest thing you've ever had to write on those little message cards? The florist I work at prints the cards and we don't have to handwrite them. The sympathy cards are always sad. But the worst one I've read was something along the lines of "I'm so sorry for the loss of your brother so soon after the loss of your parents. I upgraded that arrangement a bit and I know it wouldn't make the situation any better. But I wanted to make sure the flowers they received were extra nice." The florist didn't write it. My grandfather did. "Happy anniversary. I'll always love you. 5. It was delivered on their 40th anniversary. 5 months after he had passed from colon cancer. He had his son, my uncle, get the card and he wrote it a week before he passed. My uncle then saved it and sent it with the flowers my grandfather had ordered for her. We found the card again when she passed away. She had kept it stashed in one of his old cigar boxes with a stack of other love notes he'd sent her through the years, most when he was overseas in World War II. Fife was his pet name from my grandmother. Oh god. I need a break from this thread. My mom was a floral arrangement specialist at Kroger. A young woman came in asking for lilies and rosebuds with baby's breath. My mom put it together for her and asked what she wanted on the card. The woman replied, "To Lily, the breath of your baby shall forever bloom. In our hearts and yours." She told my mom her sister's daughter died of SIDS the day before. She's super thoughtful and poetic. That's beautiful and so sad. Our goalkeeper hung himself when he was 14. His father was one of the biggest florists with several shops all around the city. I've never seen a grave like his since. It was practically a garden. Every card read "For my son. I'm sorry," and then finished with another confession. Apparently he had neglected him after his wife died and tried to keep the business running. Not necessarily sad, but weird. After my dad's funeral we were looking at the various arrangements and the cards. A rather lovely one came from my dad's old boss. Nice. Except he supposedly had died 3-4 years earlier. He went off the grid. Nobody heard from him. Eventually everyone in the business said he died. Never did see him. He should have written on the card, "PS. I know it isn't really relevant to you anymore. But I am not dead." A man paid for flowers to be left at his wife's graveside once a month. Always wrote "I love and miss you" on it. Not the saddest thing to write, but just the idea of it. He always called to make sure we didn't forget. 2. Also, having to do the flower arrangements for a friend I was just with the night before. Imagine finding out they died because someone was ordering flowers for their parents. My gosh, what happened? And I'm very sorry to hear it. This thread is depressing. Car wreck. He was trying to see how fast he could go on a back road and lost control. The truck bounced off a boulder and wrapped a tree. He was the driver and another new friend who I had just met and started to hang out with also died. There was another passenger in the backseat who lived. My friend was in the Army National Guard. And so was my boyfriend at the time. And they were friends. My boyfriend was also in the honor guard. So he had to do the flag ceremony for our friend. I had to deliver the flowers. But didn't get to stay for the ceremony as I also had to deliver more flowers for the new friend's funeral. For whatever reason, they had the funerals at very nearly the same time. I remember being upset that our mutual friends basically had to choose one friend over the other for whose funeral to attend. So in a way, I was glad I had to work. I didn't have to make that decision. I was a florist for about 5 years and though I don't specifically remember any of the card messages, my worst day was when a local 7 or 8-year-old girl passed away after she was thrown from a horse. The neighborhood she lived in was right across the street from my shop. And one day before the funeral all the little girl's friends came in with their parents to pick things out for the funeral. It was heart-wrenching with each of these little girls and boys choosing flowers and saying what they wanted on the card. I'll never forget it. God, that would break my heart. I'm tearing up imagining the children picking out flowers for their friend and coming up with things to say. I can't comprehend what it must be like to lose a friend that early on. Yeah. They were so young. I do give the parents some credit though that they let them do that. I think there are some parents that might have tried to shelter the kids from it and maybe end up preventing them from grieving. Different kind of sad, I guess. And the card itself was actually fine, just the usual sappy little love note. Signed by your secret admirer. The guy came to one of the shops and paid in cash. When the delivery came, the girl at the door panicked and started crying, demanding to know who it was from. Our drivers don't have that information, but stayed with her and tried to console her while the main shop was called and payment info was checked. Since he didn't use a card, we couldn't have told her even in a best case scenario. We had no info at all. She didn't want the flowers, so the driver brought them back. Eventually, the shop was contacted and asked to go through their security camera footage, because the girl evidently had a long-term stalker who she had moved to get away from. Don't know the end of the story, unfortunately, but I always was relieved when the secret admirers I dealt with paid with a credit card. My grandmother was a florist for many years. I used to go to the greenhouse with her all the time and watch her make these amazing flower arrangements. One day, I was visiting and she's just got done making a stunning bouquet with a small card in the center. The card read, "Eric, I'm sorry to have heard of your recent tragedy. You'll forever be missed by us all." Turns out Eric was just getting married. The arrangement was from his drinking buddies. In a thread full of sadness. This is a perfect emotional refresher. Hahaha, I'm very happy about this happy plot twist. This thread is too sad. Not really sad, but I'm sure it made the florist wonder. In Finland, it's common when someone has a baby to get them a flower arrangement that consists of a large bouquet with a small bouquet tied to it with a ribbon. The idea is that cutting the ribbon is like cutting the umbilical cord. Before he moved here and we got married, my husband lived in the USA. One Valentine's Day he called up a florist near my office, ordered one of those new baby bouquets, and had them write in English something like "Happy Valentine's Day. I love you." Both the florist and my co-workers were very confused when they delivered the flowers to me at work. Turns out, he had picked that bouquet because he wanted my daughter to get flowers too. It was sweet and a little weird at the same time. Much like him. That's adorable. Be still my heart. Look at this one. Killing two birds with one stone here. Not a florist, but this most recent Memorial Day was the first one without my grandpa. It has been a family tradition to all go to the cemetery and lay flowers on the great-grandparents' graves, and this was the first one where grandpa would be joining that list. The flower selection at the store was pretty picked over, which is what happens when you wait to buy flowers the morning of. But with my floral design skills I picked up practicing arranging flowers for my upcoming wedding. I was confident I could arrange something pretty for all three headstones. At the cemetery I am arranging the various bouquets. Mom, Grandma and the aunts are losing it with grief until they notice this little old man 2 rows behind us. He looked so sad. He was kneeling at a grave, tearing up as he tried to stick a rose in the little flower jar often installed with a headstone. We learned that his wife of 60 years died a few days before Grandpa and that he wanted to keep the roses he brought fresh looking and watered. He told us that he wasn't good at that sort of thing and he doesn't want to embarrass the memory of his wife by having dead flowers on her grave. He didn't have any family in town and it was getting harder for him to do things. His wife had been why he got every morning and he was afraid that when he died, no one would put flowers on her grave. We just couldn't let that happen. Not on that day. So the aunts and my grandma talked to him about his wife while they watched my mom and I created a 4th little bundle of flowers to add to his failing roses. I recut the stems, added some of our flower food to the water and created a pretty little bouquet for his wife's headstone. We promised that we would look over his wife's grave too, and make sure that her flowers always looked pretty. Now every Memorial Day, we will honor my great-grandparents. Grandpa and the woman 2 rows over. You and your family are wonderful. My shop used to do funerals. We had a couple come in once and they just did not seem all there. Taking the order was very difficult, but eventually we got them sorted out with a nice little spray blue arrangement for a casket and some blue and white standing arrangements. Turns out they had just lost their 4-year-old son and were actually fresh in our shop from the funeral home where they choose the casket. We got orders the rest of the week from their friends and relatives with cards like "Heartbroken for you" and "He was the sweetest boy." Having seen them as they went through, it made every card hard to write. That seriously does make it worse. You have a face to the tragedy and it makes it all that more personal and real. We had a standing order for a weekly bouquet. This was an exclusive shop in an affluent area. And the gentleman clearly had enough money to send something showy to his beloved wife on a regular basis. What struck me was that he would personally call in a new poem with each order. And these weren't Shakespeare quotes. By any means. All were summoned from the depths of his own creativity. I was tasked with painstakingly transcribing his weekly poem onto the card. They had been married for a long time. And you can imagine how these poems would have devolved into Corneville. Yet, he never missed a single one. While I was there, we all marveled at how he always took the time from running his large company to write a love-struck message to his wife every week. He never had a secretary call in the order. I was always touched to take the call from that old guy. Then one day, a woman called in with the poem. It was quite a bit different, perhaps lifted from a Hallmark card. As I filled out the order form, she explained that her father had experienced a debilitating stroke, and she would be providing the poetry from that point forward. The deliveries stopped shortly thereafter. Edit. Row. I'm so glad that I was able to share an experience that so many enjoyed. Thank you, dear editor, for the gold. I will certainly enjoy the privileges. I always find it so wonderful to know someone was loved so well. OMG, this is so sad. I wonder if he died or the daughter just didn't want to continue doing it. Worked for a wedding event florist. Not a florist that sent out flowers when you cheat on your GF or whatever. But we had a retirement party planned. The guy built the company from scratch. Turned it into this regional multi-million-dollar enterprise. After 50 years of the company, he was retiring and setting his son as CEO. He was going to spend the rest of his life with his wife. 3 kids and 16 grandkids. Had a yacht he was going to sail to the Caribbean. He had it all planned out. Was so happy with what he built but was ready to finally care for himself. Night before the retirement party, he was driving home from dinner with his son and was hit by a drunk driver. Both him and his son, the one taking over the company, perished. Drunk driver survived. I got the call from the event venue. Got all the details. The $27K of flowers and decorations all went to waste. We filled the church with beautiful arrangements for the funeral. However, found out a few years later that the guy's daughter was getting married and used my old boss, the florist, for her wedding. Turns out her mother ended up committing suicide 9 months after her husband's death. They say she went into a deep depression after his death. She truly loved the guy and looked forward to spending the rest of their lives together. So the daughter basically lost her whole family due to some dumbass drunk driver. Just pisses me off. That idiots can't just go wrap themselves around a tree and leave everyone else alone. I hope she's doing better. Well, not what was written but the bad timing of it. My brother has always been a sarcastic and funny kind of guy. He had a friend from church who was hospitalized due to some lifelong health complications. The guy has been hospitalized a lot his life and it was expected he'll be out in no time. He sent flowers basically saying, "I bet you a $100 you'll come out of this fine and we can go get high and hammered with the money." The flowers arrived 2 days after he died. He had a friend from church. We can go get high and hammered with the money. My kinda church. I mean, isn't getting high and hammered just following Jesus' example? I was a trainee florist when I was 17. The saddest one I had was a phone order from a gentleman who wanted a bouquet of flowers with the note, "Sorry I ruined your life," to his ex-lover. Is that sad or passive aggressive? Sorry I ruined your life. Cause you'll never have a dong like this again. Not a florist. But my mom was working at the same desk job for 10 years. 9 years in a row she got Valentine's flowers from my dad, who worked at the same place in a different department, on Valentine's Day. He was a custodian so he would show up. Filthy. With a bouquet screaming, "Where's my lady?" and every year my mom and her co-workers got a great kick out of it. Until they got divorced and she didn't get flowers that last year. The whole job was quiet and concerned. I brought her flowers instead with my little sister after school, 17 and 13 years old at the time. The whole job was crying. She quit a few weeks later. Edit. What is grammar? Edit 2. I got some PMs asking. My parents were married in 1986. Divorced in 2011. They were high school sweethearts. Started dating in 1977. 2 kids. Myself and my younger sister. We're 22 and 18 now. Edit 3. Parents work at the same place. Doing different things in different departments. I am not a florist. But a few years ago on the day before his mom's birthday, my friend ordered her flowers. On the card he wrote something along the lines of "Happy birthday, Mom. I'll love you always." And he died in the middle of the night. The next day, in the middle of her morning, someone came and delivered her those flowers. Edit. For those of you asking, it was a car accident. And at the time, I think it was too much for her to handle. But now she sees it as a blessing that he was able to reach out to her one last time. Jesus. My mom's birthday is at the end of this month. Reading this thread had me thinking about flowers, so I was about to call up the florist near her work and see if I could put in an order for 3 weeks from now. Maybe I'll wait until the week before. That way you can save money just in case you die. Only slightly on topic. But I received an amusing card with a bouquet once. My mom had been dating this guy, we'll call him Bobby, who absolutely spoiled her. I'm talking massive bouquets delivered to her office at least twice a week. By the weekend, her kitchen table would be covered in these elaborate, beautiful arrangements. I came round to visit one evening and jokingly said, "Whoa, what a spoiled little beach." The next week at work, I received a pretty little bouquet with a card that read, "Now you're a spoiled little beach. 2. Love. Bobby." I always wondered what the florist who wrote that out thought. Haha, I sent my BFF some flowers after we had a really stupid argument, and the note read, "Roses are red. Violets are blue. Turns out I'm a dunt. And you are too." I tipped the florist a lot to ensure the card was what I wanted. Friend's husband texted me when the arrangement arrived to say his wife was laughing so hard he needed to find her emergency inhaler. I still use that florist every chance I get. You would have gotten away with murder if it wasn't for that meddling husband. My boyfriend has a dark sense of humor. He ordered me flowers on Valentine's Day through NPR and they delivered it with a note that said "Sorry for the herpes." The delivery person watched my face for a reaction as he handed them to me. Edit. Pic. Imgur.com link. I know that there have already been a number of responses from non-florists. But I have one. There was a lady who was my grandmother's best friend for almost 50 years. Eventually my grandmother moved to a different state and they both eventually developed mobility issues. My grandmother's friend had diabetes, which can cause more problems, and my grandmother's legs were amputated after a MRSA infection and were not able to travel very much. But they still very regularly called each other on the phone and talked for hours. My grandmother's friend eventually died due to a number of complications. And I went to my grandmother's house soon after. She sent an order to a florist shop back in New York and asked for a note to be attached that said, "I know that you always loved these flowers but could never have them because you were allergic. But I'm sending them to you now because I don't think it will bother you anymore." My grandmother had been crying for the death of her friend. But she laughed when she talked about the card later and said that she only wrote it because she knew her friend would have laughed had she seen it. I guess the circumstances for the card were sad. But the card itself was actually kind of funny. My grandmother died a few years later. But I'll always remember that aspect of the relationship between her and her friend. I was working for a florist and it was around Father's Day. Someone ordered flowers and I was instructed to write, "Dad, thanks for keeping the abuse physical," on the card. Hopefully that family just has a dark sense of humor. I mean, they would have to deal with all the physical abuse. I'm not a florist, but I have one. My best friend and basically my brother, Mike, killed himself on the 4th of July 2005. Suicide note was left. Me and his grandmother found him. The funeral was intense. Tons of friends and family. I never left Mickey's side. It wasn't a time to catch up with old friends like most were doing. It was my final time spent with the closest person to me. A few days later, a bouquet of Mickey's favorite flowers, daffodils, popped up. I opened the little envelope. It was a note from Mikey. A PS. To his suicide note for me. It said, "Thank you my brother for doing all you could. You are the sole reason I made it this far. We both need to know you did all you could, but I was not built for this world. But you were. Keep shining your light. My brother. Until the next time we meet. I love you. Mikey." I have the dried flowers and the note in its own portable safe. Every 4th of July, I take it out and read it. I have sent many bouquets to friends and family members I've lost. I have received plenty as well. In my lifestyle, we lose folks regularly. But that note was the single most powerful, painful, enjoyable, and humbling message I have ever received. Edit. Damn. Didn't think it'd sting so much to share. Miss you every day. Mikey. I once had to send an arrangement and card to a woman at her work. The order was placed by her and was for the 1-year anniversary of her miscarriage. She specifically requested that we not reveal the sender if anyone called in to ask. The card was intentionally left with no sender. So the woman got the arrangement she sent herself. Called us to ask who it was from. And we had to tell her I'm sorry. The sender has asked to remain anonymous. Even though the previous night she had called herself to order it. Absolutely heartbreaking. I've had 3 miscarriages. It is like secret grief. I know 2 family members who lost children. They talk about it. One posts regularly about it online. I feel like I can't ever share mine. It is a little death to some. People share more sympathy to those who have lost pets. I think they should. Don't get me wrong. I do however understand that people are uncomfortable with grief. Don't want to say the wrong thing when sometimes just saying something would be everything. Edit. I can't thank you all enough for your kindness and thoughtful words. I am overwhelmed. Sometimes these kind of losses are hard to explain to others because the baby wasn't a real person. By the 3rd one we were shell shocked and didn't even want to hope. We have had a beautiful baby boy since then. After 2 years of nothing happening. It was a nerve-wracking pregnancy. I was so anxious. As terrible as it sounds, I didn't want to love him or get excited. When I found out I was pregnant, I said to my best friend, "It doesn't matter anyways. The baby won't make it." We didn't buy a crib or diapers until 2 weeks before birth. I don't think anyone understood what we were going through. He was born with an extra thumb on one hand. After all the fears, it was like nothing to us. He was perfect because he lived. The most adored baby ever. It is salve to the wounds. My husband says that we would not have him if those other losses hadn't happened. That it all happened the way it should have an end. I am luckier than most. Luckier too because you all commented on this. Thank you. During pregnancy, some cells from the baby cross the placenta and establish themselves in the mother. These cells and their descendants can last for decades in the mother. This is called microchimerism. You will most likely always have a small part of them living on in you. The reverse is also true. All children likely have some cells from their mother living in them as well. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.